Book 2, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie. So, I have been recently rewatching Gilmore Girls. This, in case you're unfamiliar, this is a show, that came out in the early 2000s about a mother and a daughter. The mom, Lorelai, had her daughter Rory when she was 16. She came from a very rich, prestigious family. Her dad works at an insurance company, and he was very apathetic and as a father. And you have her mom, who's very controlling and a bit high maintenance and snobby, and they want Lorelai to marry the baby daddy, and she knew that they were not mature enough to handle it together and they weren't ready for marriage. So she takes her daughter, and knowing that her mom would probably try to control how she raised her daughter, she takes her daughter and they go to the small town of Stars Hollow, Connecticut. And their goal is for her daughter Rory to, when she is college age, to go to Harvard. So they do everything they can. Rory is very academically minded, and they end up having to go back to her parents to get money so she can go to a prep school to put on her resume to Harvard. And her mom, being all about money, is and wanting to also reconnect with her daughter and granddaughter, says that it has a stipulation. They have to come every Friday night, every day, and every week to have dinner with them. So that's kind of the catalyst of the story. You have all these residents. Stars Hollow is a typical small town with all quirky residents. You have Taylor Dosey, who owns the supermarket, and the town selectman, and he's very A-type personality and very much, wants everything to be perfect and pristine and kind of is controlling himself. You have Kirk, who is he lives at home. He's kind of weird and eccentric. Isn't really good at taking care of himself. He's definitely a mama's boy, and but yet he's very smart. And later you find out he has inherited a lot of money. He's saved up a lot of money. He does all these odd jobs around the community. You have Babette and Miss Patty, who are best friends. Miss Patty owns a dance studio. She was a Hollywood socialite, so she has a lot of interesting stories. Babette is Lorelai and Rory's next door neighbor. She's a bit of a gossip queen. She has a very interesting relationship with her husband, Maury. You have Luke Danes, who owns the diner. He's kind of, a little grouchy, but he always is there for Rory and Lorelai, and there's a love story going on. He's not good with showing his emotions, so it takes a long time for them to get to where Luke and Lorelai start dating and become a couple. And then you have Lorelai works at an inn. That's how she kind of got money for the family, got her first job, was working at a local inn, taken in by the woman who owns the inn, and became one of the maids, and eventually worked her way up to becoming the man, running the inn with her best friend Suki, who is the chef in the community, and she's played by Melissa McCarthy, by the way. And she's very neurotic, loves food, and she and Lorelai are very close. She doesn't take crap from anybody, but she's also at the same time very sweet. You have Michelle, who owns who is the guy at the desk that greets everybody. He's a bit of a snob. He's from France. He loves dogs. He has these 2 pet dogs, and he likes his dog. He's one of those people who likes animals over humans, and he's very judgmental. And then you have Lane, Rory's best friend. She likes rock and roll, and she has to hide her life from her mom, who's the stereotypical Asian mom that is like, you have to do, you have to eat certain things you can't. And she's also very protective of Lane. You can't You can't date boys, and rock and roll is the devil's music. And Lane has to kind of hide her life from her mom. And then you have all the guys that Rory and Lorelai date: Dean, Jess, and then eventually Logan, Max, and then Rory's father Christopher, and then Luke. And it's just a really fun, quirky, heartwarming show. It has its flaws. Like, there's a lot of issues been coming up about the show lately with the whole, the girls are so skinny and they eat a lot of crap, and they, they always talk about how Lorelai had to, really the whole money situation, and how Rory doesn't acknowledge her privilege because her grandparents are rich, and she becomes part of their lives, and she actually loves the lifestyle and adapts very well to it. And even though Lorelai is very down to earth and has worked hard to earn her money, they still have a lot of nice things. I mean, not as lavishly as Lorelai's parents, definitely not. A little more, bohemian almost. And then, I think the biggest issue of contention is the whole Rory, acting like she's not privileged, but also enjoying the lifestyle of having her rich grandparents. And she's kind of a hypocrite. And, there was a year in the life, which was bringing back the show after it ended years ago, and people weren't exactly happy with the direction that Rory went in the show, but there are also people who point out that this is realistic, especially for the millennial generation, my generation. And not everybody, sometimes the references and the jokes, not everybody gets. You have to really understand the jokes to really, the humor to, not always, but like there's a lot of references in the humor that that not all generations would get. It's also known for how they talk really fast. So it's just a really charming, heartwarming, fun show that's always, and everything's always going to work out for the characters. Yes, they're going to have lots of drama. I mean, of course, the last couple seasons before the show ended were very tense, and there was a lot of issues with Lorelai and Luke. And Rory, received some criticisms. Like, Rory's always wanted to be a journalist, and she finally gets the opportunity with her boyfriend Logan's dad to be an intern, and then he tells her that she's a great assistant, but she doesn't have what it takes to be a journalist, and that really hits her hard because another issue is that Rory, not just that she's privileged, but she has never been told no. Everyone looks at her as this, like, everyone in her mom, her grandparents, the whole Stars Hollow worships Rory and talks about how great she is and how talented she is and how she can do anything, which it's good to give someone encouragement, but to the point where Rory cannot handle criticism. And she ends up, and things end up falling up, and she ends up, when Mitchum tells her, Logan's father Mitchum is like, you don't got it, she decides to quit school, steal a boat, and live in her grandparents' pool house. And they let her get away with it because she is their precious Rory. They love her, and they can't resist, and they don't want to ever see her hurt. They can't resist her puppy dog eyes, as I like to put it. But the show is still great, and the first handful of seasons were wonderful. I love, Rory and Lorelai's relationship is not ideal. Like, realistically, the biggest part of the problem with Rory turns out the way she does is because Lorelai kind of like I said, has never said no to her, and kind of spoils Rory, because Rory's never, she does not know a lot of hardship. And because of how Lorelai's parents treated Lorelai, she wants to make sure that Rory is not, doesn't feel suffocated. Feels like her mom is her best friend, that she can trust her mom and talk to her mom about anything. So Lorelai kind of goes with the whole best friend first and mom second. I mean, Rory's mostly, comes off as a good kid, but then, like I said, there's a lot of things that she does later on that makes you realize the way Lorelai raised her was not that great. So other than that, you still kind of you still kind of enjoy their bond and their relationship as mother and daughter until you see the cracks in it and the flaws in that relationship. You still kind of like it at the same time, or at least I still like it. And of course, Rory is a reader. Not only is she very academically driven, although her friend Paris is more driven than she is, she's a reader. She will read all these great challenging books, and there is on the internet you can find the Rory reading challenge, and also one of her boyfriends, Jess, who was Luke's nephew and kind of a town, a kid that was acting out, very rebellious, kind of the bad boy, but he was also a reader, and that's one of the things that him and Rory connected on. And so you can get his reading list as well. Like, he's definitely one of those people who likes, probably really connects with Catcher in the Rye. It's like, I think it's one of his favorites. So, there's a lot of us readers feel like we can relate to Rory, or at least we could relate to her until later seasons. Like I said, a lot of us were very disappointed in the direction that Rory's character went. And like there's Lorelai was such in the beginning until we get older and realize how Lorelai's raising of Rory is not ideal either. Lorelai was considered this awesome mom and everything. So basically, long story short, the show is heartwarming and wonderful, but it has a lot of faults. And you could have a lot of discussions about the show. So I want to kind of explain the show to you guys. I probably explained too much, but if you haven't watched it, you might want to check it out if it's your kind of thing. Like, it might not be your kind of thing. Like, you might be more of a, like action or science fiction or fantasy, or I personally like both, but, or you might just, and it's also very, like, the day-to-day life, so it's kind of a little more slow moving than a lot of shows today. Like, a lot of the shows today are very, like, something's happening, action, something's happening, like, while this is more just, it's a more slow-going show, and it, like, unfortunately, it probably would not have worked well today with today's audience. But back in the early 2000s, it was really a great show. Really just the day-to-day life of Lorelai and Rory Gilmore, and it really looked at how these problems, they're not world events or anything, but they're still important to these characters, and they're, and it's such a good show. There are probably a lot of people that could explain it better for you guys, but again, the other reason why I wanted to explain the show to you guys is because, as I mentioned, there is a Rory Gilmore reading challenge that you can, and I printed it out. Now, unfortunately, my taste doesn't entirely align with Rory's, and I feel like there are some books that she's read that I've tried to read, and it's just the writing style is a little too challenging, or it's just not to my taste. But I did want to talk about the books that I've read, or at least checked out, like looked at and tried to read, that have come out in the past 10, 20 years, and books that I have not read, but I've read the description and they sound like Rory's kind of book, or maybe there's aspect of them that Rory can relate to. So now, with this long introduction out of the way, let me talk about the books I think Rory might read that have come out in the past 10 years. So first I'm going to talk about some authors that I think she would read, and then I'll talk about individual books. First, I feel like she would read Allie Smith. I read her book Autumn, and at the time I actually kind of liked it, which it might have just caught me I was in the right mood to read something like this, because her writing style can be a little more challenging for me, and I have trouble getting into it and following along with it. it kind of is like a little bit of a poetry feel. And I'm still struggling with poetry. Like, I've been trying to get into epic poetry, and I think when someone talks about it, then maybe I can get into it more. Like, it helped talking about Sir Gawain the Green Knight and Beowulf in the British literature class I took in 2017, 2018. I can't remember. Um, and we also read Canterbury Tales, and the only reason why I had a problem with Canterbury Tales is because I really wanted to get to Hamlet at the time. But especially like I know there's her seasonal quartet, which starts with autumn, and then I know she wrote another book, but I cannot remember. I mean, because I, lost interest in the author, I haven't kept up with what she's published. But yeah, I feel like I could see Rory getting into Allie Smith and trying it out. I don't. Next we have Emily Henry. Like, Emily Henry is more, it's not as serious, it's more fluff with, I mean, there are serious, I think I have heard, like, serious, they have, like, she has some more serious aspects in her story and characters dealing with certain kinds of issues, life issues, relationship issues. I think also, like, Emily Henry would be kind of fun for her, but also, like I said, her books do deal with a lot of serious issues. And I have been tempted to pick them up myself. She's one of the ones I have not read, but I've heard a lot about. And I think a lot of people she's very popular. So I feel like Rory would probably like just to have a little bit of a break from the more, like, world issue books and more personal stuff. I think she would be more, it would allow her to get into, stories with romance and more personal stuff. And then we have, I think she would probably try Frederick Bachman too. Again, that's a book that deals with some serious issues, but like a little more personal and a little more like closer to home. Now I do know that I think a lot of his books are very sad, but I think she would try them out and enjoy them and like find them really good. And then I also think, now I don't know how to say this author's last name, but I've heard a lot about this author lately, is Tesha Moshfegh, her My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which, by the way, if any of these books are already on the list, I don't remember what's on the list. So some of these books I mentioned might already be on that list. So I apologize if they already are. But I feel like she would be entertained by My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Let's see, I mean, there are so many that I haven't even thought about that I'm starting to think about as I talk about this. There was someone else. Oh, I think she would also like Hamnet. Which is, I think she would also read Hamnet, which is about like it takes the history we know about Shakespeare, how we know that his son had died, and that Hamlet was kind of inspired. His son was kind of inspired Hamlet, I believe, and so, but this doesn't, like, Shakespeare is in the background, and it focuses more on his wife and children, and they were dealing with the plague, and that is what killed his son Hamnet. And, like, Shakespeare is not even mentioned by name, because they don't want him to, the fact that it's about Shakespeare, to take away from that. So they take away from focusing on the family he left behind, the family that he wasn't, and it deals with grief, because of course their son died, and coping with that. And again, I think Rory would read that, which I would find that interesting to read. I also think she would read Donna Tartt. I mean, in fact, one of Donna Tartt's books, this one, The Secret History, as you can see, I started to reread it, takes place in in a college, and it's about this California kid going to a New England school and being part of this group of pretentious rich kids, and there's a murderer. They decide to murder one of their own because they don't like him and he's causing trouble. Um, and I just think, Rory would find this really good and entertaining. And of course, the length probably would not bother her. Like it, I feel like, I'm probably saying a lot of books that are super long, but to me, the length would not bother Rory. Rory could get through the length of a book really quickly. And then there's also the Goldfinch. Again, I don't know if any of these books I'm mentioning have already been on the list yet, and on Rory's reading list. I'd be curious if they were. I'll have to look and see. I know that Donna Tartt also. There's a third book by Donna Tartt that I attempted to read. It wasn't for me. It was one of those ones where I probably should have read a little bit more of it, but it just I eventually lost interest. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like this family finds a dead body and they're buried in their yard. I think one of their own family members they accuse of murdering the person, and the main character is this preteen girl, and she wants to figure it out and investigate it. And it's kind of a coming of age story, but with a murder mystery involved. I can't remember what it was called. I kept getting it mixed up with Imaginary Friend, the title Imaginary Friend. By Stephen Chbosky. But anyway, so I wish I could remember what that's called though. I also think she would read one of the books I'm currently reading is this one, The Damascus Gate by Robert Stone. And it's kind of a good novel to read, considering what's going on in the world right now, actually, because it does deal a little bit with that. I mean, it was written along in the 90s or something, so it's not about the present situation. Let me see the copyright date. Let me see if I can find the copyright date. But it does talk. It's set in the same place, and it deals with similar issues. This was published in 1937, possibly. Oh, wait, no. Oh, never mind. It was actually published in, so maybe 1937 is like, or maybe that was the first, I don't know. I don't know what 1937, but we also have 1998 and 1999. So this was published in the 90s. I think either 1937 or in the 90s. So it's not a current, it doesn't necessarily focus on doesn't talk about the current situation that's going on in Israel and all that, but I do feel like it's still very relevant, and I could see her reading something like this, especially because she's a journalist, and the main character in this book is a journalist. And I actually have another book here that I recently purchased that is also about a journalist. Now, I haven't cracked it open yet. I am thinking about reading it. And that's The Museum of Abandoned Secrets. The main character is a female journalist. Now, the Damascus Gate is a male journalist, so I don't know if that will make a difference to Rory, but this is about a female journalist, and she's decided to create a documentary about this one particular woman. And this takes place, I think, in Russia. I think it's a Russian historical figure that the journalist is wanting to do a documentary about. Because it does mention Stalin. And I think the reason why at first I thought it had to do with the Middle East, I mean, it kind of does have to do with the Middle East. Because it does refer to a woman. Oh, wait, no, the journalist is Darna. Oh, I made a mistake. when I talked about this book in my video, my video that I had just filmed, because I said Darna was the woman she was trying to do the research on, but actually Darnia is the journalist, and Elena was the woman she's researching, and she's a member of the Ukraine. Elena was a member of the Ukrainian insurgent army. So yeah, so I actually told the people. So if you watched my video where I filmed yesterday, where I talked about my recent purchases, then allow me to correct you that Darnia is the journalist, not the woman that our journalist is researching, but she is the journalist. But like I said, I do think that Rory would read something like this because it's about a journalist investigating, I think. Okay, let's see. I also think I would like to say she would read The Weight of Ink by Rachel Kaddish. Well, I mean, I don't know, because I don't know if she would be interested in the topic. So, like I said, I grabbed books that I think she might read, but then now I'm not so sure. But it is a good book, you know? Still, and I love how it still has that smell of, like, independent, old bookstore smell. But, I mean, she might read it. It's, you know, a story, it's history, you have two timelines, one in the 1660s and then the early 2000s, where a historian is researching this manuscript written by a female scribe. So I think the fact that the main character is a female would be interested, and a scribe would probably interest Rory. And it's an academic setting. But yeah, now I could be just projecting my love of this book, how this is one of my favorites. But I'm gonna say this one. I think she might check it out. Okay. And then we have one that I just want Rory to read. Deep down, I kind of want Rory to read. It is history, and that is Noli Me Tangere, Touch Me Not by Jose Rizal. I mean, I do think it's important for Rory to read, like, history of other countries outside of Europe. And this takes place in the Philippines, in actual history. And this book and its sequel got the guy who wrote it in trouble at the time. And I'm gonna, which by the way, I think I'm gonna go ahead and do a review. I'm a little nervous about doing my review because I don't know about the history. I don't know a lot about the history that sets this book, where this book takes place. But I figured I still, you know, I want to do it though. I want to attempt it. But yeah, like I said, I feel like this is a book that, or at least a book that I would like Rory to read, that I think she would find interesting. This is one of the ones that I'm wondering if it's already on the list. But A Gentleman in Moscow by A Gentleman in Moscow by Amar Tolls. I know that she's read Rules of Civility. I believe I've seen that on the list. And this is his sophomore novel, I think. About this count who ends up, like, after the Russian government is, let me see, does it say, the Bolsheviks, when the Bolsheviks take over, in this count, Alexander Rostov is, because he's an aristocrat, an unrepentant aristocrat. They put him under house arrest at this hotel. Um, and it's about him he spends his day-to-day life in this hotel. He can't leave it. And he does, if I recall, he does meet a little girl at one point that he befriends. Um, but I see her, like I said, she liked rules of civility, but, I think she might also find this one really good too. Now, I haven't read it all the way through. Like, I read a chunk of it when I first got to the library, and then I decided not to come back to it until I saw a paperback of it at a given bookshop, and I was like, let me go ahead and I'm gonna go and buy it and try it again. Because, like I said, I feel like the library was just, there was pressure to get it done, and then it's a slow moving plot, so I think that kind of potentially, a book this size that's very slow moving, I can't borrow from the library because then I have to keep renewing it. I don't like doing that. So, but anyway, I mean, like I said, I think she liked rules of civility, so I think she would try this as well. So, like I said, I feel like a lot of these books are gonna be books that I'm like, oh, I think she would try this. I think she would find it interesting. Because it's just so hard to pin. It is kind of hard to pinpoint Rory's taste in books. I think she reads a lot of variety of different types of books. I mean, I don't think she's big in the, like, some of the genre stuff, like horror and fantasy. I mean, she's read some, but not a lot. A lot of the books that she's read are kind of more contemporary or about a lot of world issues and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard for me to explain why I just think these are Rory type books. But I'm gonna continue to try. So next is Anglo-Saxon Attitudes by Angus Wilson. Again, I think Rory would find this, I gotta think a better word than interesting, but I don't know what other word. I think she would be intrigued by this one as well. And it's not a long read. But like I said, Rory's not above reading long, chunky books. And I got a few here. But I think it would be an interesting topic for her, looking at this professor, this historian who, he suspects this famous discovery is a hoax, but he's kept it secret all these years, his suspicions, and dealing with his family and like all that, and not being able to connect with them, and especially because they also, not only do they are more like their mother, who was not English, but yeah, I think she would try this one out too. Then we have, okay, this is one of the really big ones that I think she would try, and that is the Recognitions. I see her as taking on this challenge. Recognitions by William Gaddis. And again, it discusses, like, I always have to look at the back. And our world. So, it's like looks at the main character criticizing what is considered beautiful in our world, what is considered art. Now everything is fake, and the idea of imposter syndrome, if I remember correctly. Chris from Leaf by Leaf talks about this book better than I could, because at least he's read the book. I've only read some of it, because it's very dense and challenging, but I think I could see Rory taking a book like this on, and really this book would get her thinking about things and wanting to discuss it with people, and having a very lively discussion on this book. But I mean, I feel like books like this have so much to offer, but it's so hard for me to because it's so long and dense. The writing style is a bit challenging, and sometimes I feel I'm very lost, and not in a good way, but in a I don't know what's going on and I'm confused. But I'm not gonna give up. I'm still gonna keep going with this. I just need to find the perfect opportunity. So, but yeah, I think she would. I think she could take this on. Rory would. Okay, and then we have. This one might also be one that's already on her list, but Jack Edward. I was watching one of Jack Edwards' videos where he was talking about this book, and I think it is a Rory book. Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. It is the first book in a trilogy about Thomas Cromwell. Again, Rory is very academically minded. She's into history. I feel like she's kind of more history, like a more history English kind of person. So I feel like she would be want to know, like, would read this about this fictional take on Thomas Cromwell and what he achieved and all his manipulations. I think this topic would be interesting to her. Okay, well, before I forget, I just remembered another author that I don't have her books, and the other author I was thinking of, which is Sally Rooney. I could see Rory reading Sally Rooney, especially because I think she could relate a lot to what Sally Rooney writes about. She also has very much a similar writing style to Ali Smith, at least from what I recall when I attempted one of her books. Normal People is one of her books. That's the only title that can come to mind by Sally Rooney. But I can see Rory getting into her works, and I feel like she could connect with them and relate to some of the story, what happens in her plots. So yeah, Sally Rooney. Now back to the books that I actually have that I can show you, give you a visual. Okay. Then we have Luminaries, which is one that I have not finished. By Eleanor Catton, which Eleanor Catton just recently, another book that's much shorter just come out. Birmingham or something? Birmingham? I don't know. But again, a history book. It won the Man Booker Prize, and it's again about a part in the world a country in the world that she doesn't know, that Rory does not know a lot about. I think she would be intrigued by it. The mystery and everything, and like I said, it's hard to determine. I mean, I would love to hear Rory talk about, like, if she was a real person and not a fictional character. I would love to her. I mean, I wish that they had her talk about, instead of just making references, like, talk about some more books, so that, like, they had moments where characters would talk about books, but, like, especially scenes with Jess and when they would be sharing books and trading, But there weren't enough scenes where she really had a discussion with someone about literature, which I guess they couldn't waste time on that. But maybe you guys can help me out and tell me if some of these books you would agree with would be Rory's kinds of books. But yeah, I said the Luminaries. I need to read a little more to get back into the book and start reading it again to refresh my memory of what happens in this. Like, I think there's this American guy, his friend was visiting New Zealand, then he ends up dead, and our main character is trying to investigate it, and it's during the gold rush. And he's kind of not that very nice and respectful to the people, the Maori people. He's just kind of an ass to them and almost comes off as kind of racist from what I remember. But again, I feel like Rory would find this a really good, really entertaining, really interesting book. Again, sorry. Again, I keep using the word interesting, but I don't know what other word to come up with. because some of these I'm also sharing books that I haven't read all the way through, but I do feel like they do give me Rory vibes. Okay. So this one I'm not entirely sure, but Rory has read some Jane Austen. And I'm sure, like most people, she loves Pride and Prejudice. And this is about a character in Pride and Prejudice and her perspective on things. And the character is Mary Bennet. And probably Rory, back before she went to college, could relate to Mary. Because, relate to Mary Bennet, who is very academically minded as well. Very quiet, very shy, very reserved. And that's kind of how Rory is in the beginning. And until she people help her come out of her shell a little bit. And I feel like she would sympathize with Mary and connect with Mary Bennet and would find it kind of fun to read a story about a character in Pride and Prejudice who's kind of in the background. But yeah, I think I would, like I said, so I would love for, but also I would just love for Rory to read this. Okay. Then we have, I already talked about that one. Then we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is one of the ones I think, and someone did mention this book on the Goodreads Gilmore Girls group when the inspiration for this video was actually on Goodreads. They have a group that I'm in about the show. They talk about the characters, they talk about the show, they talk about the relationship drama, and of course, because it's still Goodreads, there is talk about the books that Rory reads. And someone posed the question of, what are some books you think that Rory would read that have just come out more recently? And someone did mention this book, If We Were Villains. Again, another college setting. People often compare it to The Secret History as it has a similar conflict of someone being murdered and it being in the book focusing on who did it and the aftermath and what led up to it. And the main character, in this case, is accused of being the murderer. And it does deal with Shakespeare, so I'm sure Rory would have an easier time getting the references than I would, because I've not read a lot of Shakespeare. But I think she would know what the references are a lot better than I would. Again, pretentious rich kids. I think some of the main characters the characters might remind her of Logan's friends, probably. And actually, Ian, there's one character that makes me think of Logan's friend. I don't know, like, if it would be Finn or one of the other guys that would remind you of this character. But my first thought is Finn, but thinking about it, like, I do need to reread this book at some point. But, maybe this September, October, I might pick it up. But, yeah, I feel like she would enjoy this, too. Then we have one that I think she would try. It might be, even for her, it might be too much. Too much of trying to read, because she might even be critical of this book. And it's trying to be, this book being, very unique and doing its own thing. But maybe not. Maybe I'm being a little unfair. But I put The House of Leaves. I also think The House of Leaves Rory might try as well. It is a little complicated. The writing style is a little weird, a little odd. And it can be hard to follow along. So that's why I'm not sure if Rory would love this or not. But so far it does seem like a really fun haunted house story. Like I said, I have recently attempted to read it. I read some of it back around Christmas time. But yeah, I think she would find it something worth attempting, possibly. I could be wrong. Like I said, maybe some of you can comment and tell me if you would agree with these. If you would agree with, but yeah, this is a very complicated read, but I think she would try it out. And then the last one I'm going to mention is Miss March by Virginia Fito. This is a woman that marries a famous marries a man who becomes a famous author. They have a son together, and she finds out from a fan of one of his books while just going about her day, finding out that her husband might have wrote a character based on her, and the character's not very likable, at least in Miss March's eyes. The character isn't a very nice person. She's a bit Miss March is not happy about this. She's very perturbed. Actually, Miss March kind of reminds me of Emily Gilmore. And I don't know if Rory would admit this, but she would probably see her grandmother in this woman. He was very, and the mystery and just seeing this woman go crazy, I think would but yeah, I think she would also read this one as well. So those are books that I think Rory would read. Sorry I didn't really explain too much why they give me Rory Gilmore vibes. But some of them, I admit that I'm picking books. A lot of the books that I picked up are books that I've started to read but haven't finished, or have just recently added them to my collection. And they just give me the little bit I've read, or just what I've read on the back, what they're about, makes me think of Rory a little bit. So it's hard for me to elaborate. I probably should have waited before I did this video, so I could elaborate more and read more books that are Rory's kind of style. But then I am also not... A lot of what she likes to read, what I know she likes to read so far, is not always to my taste. Some of it is. I mean, that's what I should do, so I can do, that's what I should do, now that I filmed this video, challenge myself to read books that I think Rory would read. Out of the ones that I haven't read or I haven't finished. That's what I should try to do. As well as read some of the ones on more of the books on her list, which I'm slowly doing that. I've marked off, twice. There's one particular, I don't know if it's Reddit or somewhere, where you can check off the books. It has pages of all the books that she's read, or they say she's read, or that have been mentioned, and you can check them off, and then you can see what your score is, how much percentage of books that you've read that Rory has read. And I haven't read a lot, but I've read some of them. And honestly, and to be fair, I've also marked ones that I've read, ones that I'm not sure if I read, like some of the fairy tales or books that I have not actually finished. They're DNF, so I've attempted to read them, but didn't really read them, if that makes, as in I DNF them, I didn't finish them, I didn't complete them, so technically they don't count, but I have read some of them. Now, if there are any fantasy books, I know that Lord of the Rings is on the list. So, that as a book that she's read. Or, I think she's read all three of them. All three parts. And yes, I said parts, because I know there are hardcore fans who do not like that people look at it as 3 separate books. Although he published them in, it comes out nowadays in 3 separate books, and he published them one right after the other. So I think you should be a little more understanding on why people see it that way. But anyway, which makes me think maybe she would attempt Silmarillion. I don't know if she's read it or not, but I mean, I know she's read the original Lord of the Rings. Like I said, she's read Lord of the Rings, and I believe she's read The Hobbit too. So I don't know if she's read Silmarillion. Like I said, I have to double check that list that I printed out, and see if she's read it yet. If she ever read that one. But there's a lot of Lord of the Rings content out there that Tolkien wrote, so I'd love to see her read some of that, But then she's not, like I said, she's not a fantasy girly, so I don't know. But anyway, so that is my attempt at telling you guys books that I think that have come out in the past 10 years that I think Rory would read. And again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you agree with them? If you don't agree, what books do you think Rory would read if you watch the show and are familiar? What are some books that you think Rory would read? And like I said, if you agree or disagree with my selections. And maybe you can give a better, some of these books that I haven't continued, but that I want to read, but I haven't picked them up because of length or something, and I recommend them. Maybe you can, I've said that I think Rory would read these books because of the little bit of information I have gathered so far. Maybe you can tell me if you agree with that, and if you don't agree, like, tell me what's a book that you would put in place of that book. So I'm gonna stop talking now and end this video here. So if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and click subscribe. Like I said, despite what some people say, I do think it does help in the algorithm, giving the video a like, or no pressure. I mean, and if you want to be notified, you don't have to, but if you do want to be notified when I publish my latest videos, please click the bell icon, and and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.